So it's definitely lovely to be here. And I think it really is my honor to be invited, as you said, the first guest for this group. And I look forward to conversations and maybe in the future collaborations. And definitely, I would like to thank Professor Suding Liu, although he's not here today, right, for inviting me to share my talk with AARC. And I would like to discuss today my book, Socially Engaged Art in Contemporary China, Voices from Below, published in 2019. And I think I would like to talk a little bit about how I came to this project. My research has centered around the evolving landscape of contemporary Chinese art since the 1990s. Earlier, I examined both official art created within the framework of mainstream socioeconomic and political ideologies, and unofficial art or independent art produced by artists who ventured outside of the established officialdom. And over time, I found myself increasingly drawn to artists who adopted a critical stance towards China's national development projects, such as urbanization and marketization. Consequently, my research shifted towards this direction, and I took up a number of research projects exploring the interrelations between urban transformation and contemporary visual arts from China. And it was during my extensive travels to various cities and villages for those projects that I began noticing an emerging trend, socially engaged art, or in its various names. I encountered artists and curators, critics who were working to engage with local communities through art and cultural programs in various urban locations or rural locations. And interestingly, these practitioners shared a critical assessment of Chinese urbanization and the broader market-driven social economic transformations. So further exploration led me to discover more art projects aimed at voicing social criticism, fostering community building, and supporting marginalized social groups through artistic and creative practices. What became apparent to me was a shared faith among these individuals in the potential of individual-based small-scale efforts to initiate bottom-up social changes. This realization really ignited my great interest, and I started undertaking serious research on this topic. The more I delved into this field, emerging field, the more captivated I became by the diversity of social practices in China and the latent potential of socially engaged art as a form of grassroots social activism, cultural activism. While it was still a minor trend compared to the dominant state-sponsored art, I discerned a growing energy in this field. And after I collected enough materials and cases, I wrote this book. It was really my way of learning, identifying, and understanding the experiences, motivations, approaches, and challenges of people who were driving the social engaged art movement in contemporary China. So I open my book with a quote from Václav Havel, writer and former Czech dissident turned president, and he was the first democratically elected president. History is not something that takes place elsewhere. It takes place here. We all contributed to making it. If bring back some human dimension to the world depends on anything, it depends on how we acquit ourselves in the here and now. My book features socially engaged art from China produced by various art professionals and their collaborators who assume the roles such as artist, critique, curator, educator, cultural activist, and social activist. Each of them seem to have taken upon a mission of social intervention through art, however they define it. So in light of Havel's quote, I perceive these individuals as people who have made the decision to consciously participate in the making of both art history and history here and now. And on the other hand, I also took inspiration from the work of Grant Castor the leading American art historian writing on socially engaged art. In the inaugural issue of the first journal dedicated to socially engaged art, he wrote, "I always felt that the power of art rested in its ability to evoke utopian possibilities. This spoke to my conviction of the transcendental potential of art to go beyond the immediate reality, thus enabling us to envision a better future or utopian possibilities." So, believing in the importance of art as an active presence in the making of history here and now may sound contradictory to the conviction of the power of art to stimulate utopian possibilities. However, in the practice of socially engaged art, as with Chinese art professionals I have encountered during the course of my research, this contradiction actually inspires innovative visual and social works that are simultaneously idealistic and of immediate relevance to the everyday existence of many ordinary people. And I would like to argue that it is the belief in both that has motivated many to work tirelessly to expose the injustice people have suffered in a society governed by an authoritarian regime, calling upon awareness of specific social problems produced under the logic of consumerist urbanization, and fostering community-oriented social interactions that allow marginalized populations to benefit from the economic, technological, and social progresses of our contemporary times. My book comprises of 8 case studies varying in length. The introduction chapter features Ai Weiwei, a versatile artist and activist who adopted an openly distant stance in his critique against government corruption and censorship, which has made him probably the most well-known and influential Chinese socially engaged artist. His art activism officially started in 2008, the year when an earthquake of 8.0 magnitude hit Sichuan province and claimed more than 81,000 lives. Among people killed, thousands were school children. While mourning their loss, parents demanded the local government investigated the official corruption that they suspected to be responsible for the substandard construction of school buildings that collapsed and killed students during the earthquake. To their frustration, the government not only denied such wrongdoings, but also prohibited parents and civil rights activists from pursuing the truth. So to commemorate those children perished in the earthquake, Ai Weiwei actually initiated many projects. And the one I'm showing you here compiled more than 5,000 names already identified by people who looked through the records and basically compiled these names themselves. And his studio developed a collaborative sound work entitled Nian, Remembering, in 2010. More than 3,000 volunteers across China participated by sending in their voice recording as they recited the names. So as such, these names that the government was eager to forget or erase live on and will continue to do so in the form of a collaborative digital artwork. The work engaged the Chinese people, and I'm quoting here, as citizens with rights to speak, to mourn, to ask, and to criticize, unquote. And it really instigated a strong sense of civic participation among many volunteers. And this was in 2010, 2 years following the earthquake. And so in introduction chapter, via visualizing Ai Weiwei's work, I set the stage for the central theme of the book, Voices from Below. The notion Voices from Below refers to the voices and perspectives of art professionals working as or collaborating with grassroots communities. It also refers to the voices of marginalized regions and populations that are amplified and made audible, visible again to the public via artistic activities. The primary objective of the book is to present the multifaceted ways in which contemporary Chinese art professionals engage with their society directly, tackling critical issues and advocating for the improvement of conditions for human living, especially those of the underprivileged. My book has 3 parts. Part 1, social criticism through arts, have 2 chapters, and chapter 1 features Shanghai-based art critic and curator Wang Nanming, who, since the early 2000s, has written extensively and curated some of the earliest exhibitions to theorize and promote socially engaged art. He called it critical art initially in his advocacy of contemporary art as a form of social criticism that should contribute to modern citizen politics. The second chapter delves into the work of Wang Juliang, a photographer and filmmaker who dedicated his efforts to documenting trash mismanagement in Beijing with photographic series and a film entitled Beijing Besieged by Waste. And later, the devastating consequences of plastic pollution as it manifested in plastic recycling industry in China with a documentary film, Plastic China. His visual storytelling became his tool of social criticism and environmental activism. Part 2, place construction with art. I also have 2 chapters, and chapter 1 deals with the urban-based curator and cultural activist Zheng Dazhen's efforts to save and revitalize an ancient street in the ancient city Quanzhou, her hometown, through collaborating with cultural professionals, small business owners, and sometimes local government agencies, tapping into the official discourses of cultural heritage preservation and creative industries. She undertook a lifestyle activism that led to place-specific and cultural sensitive grassroots community building. Chapter 4 focuses on Zhuo Jing, a curator and leading practitioner of arts-based rural reconstruction movement in contemporary China, who has worked in various rural sites across China, aiming to revitalize the declining rural society and rural public life. Via architectural conservation projects, exhibitions, festivals, and other cultural programs, he brought urban-based artists, architects, designers, and other professionals in close contact with the rural world and the rural population. And together, they tackled various problems brought about by China's state-orchestrated urban-centered developmental strategies. Part 3, personal development in art, also has 2 chapters, and chapter 5 explores artist Wen Fan's evolving participatory art that involves collaborations with migrant workers, rural women, and other socially underprivileged populations and communities in her effort to make contemporary art more relevant to the lives of ordinary people. Deploying art as a catalyst for personal growth, she strives to empower marginalized individuals, so enabling them or helping them to become creators who can use artwork to shed light on their challenges and aspirations. Chapter 6 examines the efforts of 2 self-fashioned educational activists, Hu Jianqiang and Wang Jun, who tackled the inequality of education, particularly in the realm of art education, that has been experienced by children living in marginalized regions. Hu Jianqiang primarily operates from his rural hometown, while Wang Jun has engaged in this work across multiple locations, like an itinerant profession. Despite their different approaches, both individuals embody grassroots initiatives aimed at addressing the pervasive issue of educational inequality via art. As you can expect, my methodology was primarily informed by my training as an art historian who reads through, around, and beyond images. But of course, socially engaged art does not always involve images. So in my book, I acknowledged processes that may or may not contribute to image production as part, actually a very important part of socially engaged art making. And my art historical analysis was supplemented by field work, where I visited project sites, observed, conducted interviews, and engaged in conversations with those closely involved, as well as those that were not that involved in order to understand how a particular art project unfolded and was received. In addition, these field visits supplemented me with necessary geographical, spatial, cultural, socioeconomic, demographic, and even political context for understanding the current concerns or challenges of a particular community, as well as the significance of artistic endeavors that were taking place there. And in essence, I intended for this book to convey several key messages. Number one, socially engaged art has gained remarkable momentum in contemporary China over the past decade. And message two, a little bit along here, within this realm of practice, art transcends the mere creation of art objects or visual or aesthetic experiences. It becomes a platform for people to collaborate in pursuit of various socially oriented agendas. It takes on the mission of crafting new social spaces, processes, and relationships that contribute to the development of a fair, more just, and sustainable society. Number three, in the context of China's authoritarian political system, socially engaged art professionals not only forge new ways for artistic expression and alternative spaces for knowledge production, but they also demonstrate that the efforts of concerned individuals can pave the way for creative and constructive challenges to China's uneven and unsustainable development. Number four, their creative work accentuated the practical, transformative, and activating power of art for social criticism, place construction, and human development. And last, not the least, they are among, I consider them as among individuals or individual citizens who act on their belief that their small-scale work could make a difference, thus claiming the right to bottom-up social changes instead of waiting for the changes to happen from top down, as seems to be the general norm, like in a country like China, historically and contemporary. In closing, I hope you enjoy my the narratives and perspective I shared in this brief talk. Thank you. I'm going to stop share, right, or take down my my PPT.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let me stop.
I have so many questions.
Yeah, anybody jump in.
Elsa?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question. Mei Ching, thank you. That was really interesting. And I love the breadth of people that you spoke to in such different art forms in different regions. How do they survive? When they're independent, how do they sustain themselves?
That's a very good question, right? I think different individuals has their own different ways. Some got sponsorship from maybe local business. Okay? Some would work with local government agencies, tapping into the national discourse of cultural heritage preservation and creative industry. So they could do the project by project base. Right? Some would like work. In a sense, they actually collaborated with local government agencies, like coming up with ideas to promote the local specific cultural production while inserting in their agenda.
Okay.
And some would like seek public donation.
Okay.
And
is there much of a culture of public donation to art?
Not. I have seen the development of public donation in recent years with a lot of like social media forum, right? People have been doing that, yeah. But usually in the world of art, I see donations usually coming from the art communities more than other, right? Yeah, unless you really work closely with certain private sectors, right? And you develop like a long-term relationship, like Zhuo Jin, right? The curator, the itinerant curator, he's really been able to somehow work with some private sectors like design company, and I think they appreciate his vision. So he received a lot of support from them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So the book comes out in 2019. I'm guessing your field work ended someplace around 2017 or something.
18, I think 18 probably. Yeah.
Exactly. How have things changed over the past 5 years?
Yeah. It definitely has changed. So 2019, the book came out, right? And 2019 actually was the last summer I was able to visit China. And then the pandemic came, and so I was not able to do it for 4 years. And this past summer, I went again to China, and I spent like 2 months there meeting people. I've been, some were featured in this book, and also people who are not. And I learned quite a mixed, mixed information or mixed things going on, right? On the one hand, definitely it's apparent, the government has tightened up and control over cultural production. So the space for kind of voicing your different critical ideas was really shrinking, right? That's on one hand, and so the challenge was definitely enormous. And on the other hand, there's something also quite exciting going on. It's governments like embracement of socially engaged art, which is quite apparent as well. Yeah, especially in the front of community development, urban renewal, and arts-based rural reconstruction. Government actually has invested quite a lot of funding resources and even policy support to community development, community renewal, urban renewal, and the rural renewal. And this definitely opens up a lot of opportunities, right? But of course, you have to work creatively under the overall umbrella of beautiful China, right? Rejuvenation of traditional Chinese culture that's promoted by Xi Jinping, right? So it indeed creates more opportunities, especially for one thing, it's that arts-based rural reconstruction or artists or art curators who were initiating those projects in the countryside early times. Like when I started doing research, it was novelty. It was real novelty. A lot of people did not know what's going on, and not to mention local officials. They thought they definitely thought it was something so foreign to them, right? But this arts-based rural reconstruction has been actually really developing. And I think in 2008, around 2008 to 2019, one of the top state-funded art museum actually exhibited a number of arts-based rural reconstruction project. Okay? Wow. And basically making this like a national trend. And so now artists and curators, when they go to a rural village, right, countryside, they actually will be welcomed by local officials who are under the task to revitalize my country, my town, my village, my county. So they're seeking up to the involvement of those professionals, like art professionals and design professionals and architects, hoping they can bring in expertise and people to their location. So that's definitely a new development.
Wow, that is fascinating. Yeah, and I imagine the artists kind of have to navigate in that space using the discourse of national heritage or the discourse of rejuvenation, and then also bringing in other things simultaneously.
Yeah, they have to do that. And the thing about what happened in China is people tend to think that China is like a centralized authority, like what's being decided on top is going to get implemented in every part of China. But actually, it's not the case. If you like really go to different places, you see it's so different. And the local government agencies, officials' interpretation of the central policy is very different. Some will be super conservative. They don't want to go out anything beyond what's in official policies. Others be actually also quite daring, quite experimental, and they dare to embrace artists who propose something that's not in the policies, but also it's not prohibited in the policies. So I really, witnessed such a different attitude. In one place, like Chongqing, it's the major municipality, right? And I heard from the artists and the curators there, that's, according to them, the municipal government is quite conservative in a way that anything that's not in the policy document, they are not going to support. Okay. But then in another city, also in Sichuan province, Chengdu, okay, Chengdu, I heard from local community engagement professionals and artists that in their city, it's anything that's not being prohibited, and they can do it. And local government is not going to stop them. Yeah, so it's very experimental. And I would think such kind of varieties, different approach to central government policy initiative vary tremendously, because China is such a vast country with so many different local traditions and practices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think exactly because there's no menu of censorship, like you follow this and follow that, right? So it really leads to local officials to interpret how, what to censor, how to censor.
Great. Mauricio? Oh, we can't hear you.
It reminds me of this distinction that's made in cultural policy studies about explicit and implicit policies, right? So if you want to find out what's going on, there's the implicit and then there's the explicit, and there's a certain flexibility, right? There's certain spaces of discourse where that happens. I was going to ask you, you said something at the beginning of your presentation about the terms or how people refer to socially engaged art. I was wondering, when you started engaging these artists about your topic and about these, socially engaged art here, we're with Stephen, we're doing a project about the term, the concept, how it's changed. What is the reactions that you would get? What would people feel more comfortable with? Or like, what are the genealogies that you see sort of arriving at that idea of socially engaged art, which I'm sure it's a challenge to conceptualize both in the book and in the research.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing this up. Yeah. I think early time, right, they were like definitely the idea of social intervention, the idea of the publicness or expanding the publicness of art, right? And I think these were terms that were actually circulating in like essays among some art critique and art historians. Like Wang Nanming, he actually used a critical art, right? Did I say critical art, right? In his conceptualization of a socially engaged art. Yeah, critical art. And so, yeah, those were different terms. And when I brought up social engaged art, also it's translated in Chinese. There are two different versions, of different translations. Actually, one is more closely related with like a participatory art, right? Another is like intervention. So they are like a different kind of translations. And but in general, when I bring up the social engaged art, maybe it's like people I talk to will not know what's going on, but then I explain, right? They say, "Oh yeah, I'm making social engaged art." So definitely there's I think a growing interest in making art that's directly engaging with the problems that's going on in China, or with more, I would say, more constructive kind of activities like community development and renewal. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really interesting.
Mei Xing, you spoke at the beginning about those two kind of camps of art, the official art and then those independent artists that you're working with or researching. I wondered if there's ever any exchange or flow between those two, or are they really separate camps? So for example, does the independent art ever kind of write back or speak back to the official art with those official discourses? And can people who are working in this world, can they ever also be part of the independent art world, or are they do they have to stay separate?
They're actually in constant flux. They are in constant flux, yeah. Ever since the 1980s, when China opened itself up, that's when unofficial art began to emerge, right? That's when there was like opportunities to open up and an artist could work outside of the official ideological framework, right? So that was really the beginning of unofficial art. Before that, everything was official, right? I mean, there's no private space, no unofficial art. But 1980s was really the beginning, right? And this and some art historians refer this as like avant-garde art, right? And then unofficial art continued to develop in the 1990s, and I think it's really around the 2000s. Around 2000s, there's like really we see the emerging of the how to say the merging, right? The merging part of the unofficial art is merging with part of the official art. Definitely, is merging with one thing I identify as like the mechanism behind this kind of merging or kind of jumping around. It's international exhibitions. Okay, international exhibitions. Right, when first was unofficial artists who were invited to exhibit in international exhibitions outside of China, right? And then, of course, they brought back reputation and economic benefit. And I think that just challenge that people who work for an official art world. They think, okay, we also we don't want to just not we don't want to ignore that that's such a thriving kind of domain, right? So you also see state-sponsored international exhibitions. And that's where you really see, right, the merging, because state-sponsored museums and exhibitions, we invite independent curators to be, to be their advisors to curate exhibitions for them. We begin to see the merging of unofficial art and official art, right? And to the by the beginning of 2000, so 2003 and 8, when the state actually entirely adopted the international kind of exhibition format, and really in the I think 2003 was when the state first like had established this China Pavilion at Venice Biennale, right? And the artworks they exhibited, right, just earlier in the 1990s would not be accepted as official art, but then they embrace it. So definitely this complicit, how to say, the working together, right? Yeah, but of course they each still have their own core, right? Their own core, their own, I think, audience, right? Audience, right? But definitely it's like the blurring of boundaries.
Okay, and they have different aesthetics as well as different audiences, would you say?
Yeah, primarily they have their different aesthetics, different audiences for official art. The core, right, of the official art still you have they are responsible for illustrating state ideology, right, policies, and they mainly populated in state-run museums and exhibitions, like national art exhibitions, like exhibitions that commemorate important national dates, right, like a national holiday. And then you have an official art. And now actually people that definitely in contemporary China, art historian no longer use unofficial art, right, anymore. I think since the beginning of 2000s, because this really the blurring. So unofficial art as terms no longer has its ground reality, because with the open up of the market economy, with the open up of just state institutions for individual to pay and exhibit their art. So kind of the meaning of unofficial art, I think has lost or done its historical task, I would say. So now I think fewer people are talking about unofficial art. We talk about contemporary Chinese art. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fascinating. Thank you.
I have so many questions. Okay, but this one, so you live in California, you're an art historian, and so you're familiar with sort of how socially engaged art works in the US and other parts of the world. I was struck by your key sort of takeaways. Number 3, it starts out in the context of Chinese authoritarian political system, and then goes on. How do you, knowing both worlds or knowing many worlds, see how socially engaged art sort of works differently in China than, say, the United States or Europe or, other parts of the world? Like, how does that context shape both the aesthetics, the approach, any place you want to take that?
Thank you for that question. I have to admit that my main focus, right, in China. So my knowledge about what's happening in the United States and other places are mainly based on my reading of literatures, right? So I don't have hands-on grounded experience, grounded knowledge about what's happening in other parts of the world. So I dare not to say that I am able to really compare, right, very insightfully the differences, right? So, but I guess my kind of understanding sometimes gained from conference presentations when I not engage with other people who write research in different fields, right? So I don't think I'm able. I don't think I'm able to really provide it insightful answer to to comparing, right? But in general, I think in general, as China is being understood, and I agree, is an authoritarian regime, right? And so public space where this public space where artists can engage, I would think it's much more limited in comparison with other more democratic societies. So there'll be like a general assumption. But I also know that in liberal societies, they have the different challenges, right? Corporation power, and there's also a lot of censorship going on, just different forms of censorship. And so, and especially in the liberal societies, you have such divisions, right? And so I would imagine they have a different set of challenges in terms of socially engaged artists advancing their projects. So that'll be like my general response to this question. I don't know. You probably will tell me more, right? Because you guys have been talking.
No, we did. I mean, I couldn't tell you more, but I think it is. Xiding is. This is one of the things that he's really helped educate us a little bit about just sort of how many of the assumptions that those of us coming from the West and the North have about what is socially engaged art and how it works in the world really are just Western and Northern assumptions, and it works very differently in different parts of the world. And so that's what's been great about having this group, is the folks from Africa will say, well, that's not how it works here. And so that's why just your insights into just describing how it works in China are super valuable to me, at least, because I don't know. But that's what's great about the conversation. My hunch is in the US, there's much more freedom, but nobody really cares. In other words, there's lots of socially engaged artists with lots of freedom to do what they want, but they have very little engagement with any meaningful change, actually. And they're not noticed by the government because the government doesn't care about them. They're not oppressed by the government because the government doesn't care about them. They're just sort of doing things over there, right? And that gets very frustrating, I think, for artists because they're not recognized as critics in many ways. So that's one, just again, off the top of my head, a comparison that we might make.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, you don't have the pressure, then you don't have the boundary to break, and if your effort is misplaced, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's something good about someone saying, no, you can't do that. Because then you're like, I probably should be doing that, right?
I was going to say the issue of co-optation too, right? If there's something that happens when anything can go, and every single actor just claps and says like that was great. let's keep things as they are. The next day is the same order of business. I have a question about you started with Ai Weiwei at the beginning, and I'm wondering which of course has also contributed to this, featuring of these kinds of work at the global scale, validating also that critical commentary, but that's an uncomfortable figure for the Chinese state, right? I mean, there's a lot more friction, I would think, between the character of Ai Weiwei and somebody who's working at the local level, sort of far away from that centralized eye, right? And what is the relationship, or how do these artists, if I don't know if you've been able to sense that, how do they perceive of each other's scale? Like, is Ai Weiwei doing the same kind of work that they are in a different way? What are those kind of frictions or connections that maybe you've perceived between these different actors that are so diverse?
Yeah, I think at least I can say about two things. One thing is so currently Ai Weiwei is the word name. His name is taboo, okay, in all official publication. And I'd like to tell you a very creative way. So this an artist I met this past summer, and he was publishing a book of his, like a recent exhibition, right? And he included a photo of him with Ai Weiwei. And I look at the photo, I said, oh, you can do that, because the publication house, the publishing house, the press was official press, right? And all official presses or they receive these guidelines. There are certain names, certain terms you cannot include. You have to remove them. So I was surprised, how can you have Ai Weiwei here? He said, okay, I personally talked to the printing company, right? Who does the printing job for this publishing house, quite a prestigious publishing house. And I talked to them personally that, can you print just a number of books with Ai Weiwei's photo and his name, so keep that. And for the majority of the book, right, the release through the press, the publishing house, his name was not there. Okay, so I think it's artist's way of really bypassing the censorship. So Ai Weiwei definitely, I think, is admired by a lot of contemporary Chinese artists who pursue, a kind of socially engaged direction in their art, right? Definitely admired tremendously. But also, he came from very different background. Right? He came from quite elite background. Okay, what he could do, not everybody could do. Okay, other people who was unknown, artists from maybe small province, you might end up being imprisoned, right? Disappeared without leaving any any kind of influence. Probably people just not know you, right? Unless you be super creative in a way that you don't directly present your message in a kind of confrontational way. He's confrontational, right? He's figure pointing. What he does is super courageous, right? And I don't expect even I think it would be even fair to expect other artists to emulate him. So his case is not emulable. It's not, right? It's like really in open light, and he's confrontational. But because he has such a prestigious background, and he has established such a network of support domestically and internationally, so he could garner all the support that to a certain degree protected him, right? So he would never be imprisoned as a political prisoner, right? No, I mean, when he was detained, that the charge was tax evasion, right? So something else, right? Yeah. But definitely, his case, I would say, is kind of unique, right? Coming from his family background and the network, the cultural network he established over the many years that he worked. And a lot of artists, they are not able to do this, so their approach would be much more soft, right? I consider like soft cultural activism rather than the very hardcore political activism.
Thank you.
Could you make that distinction for us, the sort of the political versus the cultural activism? That's really interesting. How do you see that?
So political activism, I from the case of Ai Weiwei, right, he's openly criticizing Chinese government's lack of accountability to its people, and there's corruption in the way the policy is being implemented, and then the kind of the horrible human rights condition in China. So he's really openly criticizing these political problems, or those problems that should be the domain of political institutions, right? So that's political activism. Yeah. I don't think his went that far to actually champion in new government. I don't think he did that. No, neither be another from the political activism, like start a new party and he challenged the current government. I don't think he has done that. He's more into really criticizing the way the human rights problem in China. Yeah, that's political activism.
And how would you define cultural activism?
For me, cultural activism would be you promote ideas for social changes via cultural means, art, exhibitions, educational projects, and the like. So for me, that's cultural activism.
So not directly challenging political institutions, but instead sort of that soft power of changing the way people think or the way people act in a society.
Yeah, that's kind of my understanding of cultural activism.
Okay.
And which can contribute to different ways of cultural production, cultural dissemination. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm sorry, because I'm fascinated by these distinctions, particularly in the context of China. And then that almost takes on a critical resonance because there's an official culture of which this is creating a counter model for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A new space for cultural production, cultural sharing, right? And understanding of the political system and the institutions there. So that I consider is also activism.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to be cognizant of the time. It's 5 minutes to 3. Any other questions that you may have, Elspeth, maybe, or yeah, I'm sure
Can I
there's.
squeak in one more?
Yeah. Do it.
Mei-Ching, does that cultural activism spill over into online spaces like the Chinese in TikTok or on WeChat? Are people then picking up on that subtle cultural signals and maybe amplifying it in a social media space in the Chinese context, or not so much?
I myself haven't looked in great depth into the online activism, but I actually indeed in my book I cited scholars who have done research on online activism, internet activism. So they have like a different term, right? Digital activism, online activism. But I would consider them also kind of falling within the domain of cultural activism. Right? It's a different way of expressing yourself, different way of sharing, building network, right? And indeed it plays a very important role in sometimes in political activism, other times in so online then offline activism, cultural activism. Yeah, it definitely is a very very important space because now more and more people are actually organizing, informing each other via social media network, online network. So, and in some other cases I researched about that's not included in this book. Indeed, can see that some artists are really using online space to pursue or to advance their projects, and some are quite effectively. Yeah.
Okay, I better get your book. Thank you.
Thank you.
We all should. Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Mei-Ching. This has been wonderful. I'm sorry we have to cut it short. I mean, we would keep on the conversation, and thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
so
That's actually lovely opportunity for me, to revisit the ideas that I wrote in a book and really to exchange with you here. It's such a really lovely opportunity, even
Yes.
for